Attendees are in list.
Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled that you are here with us. As Ryan said, we are delighted to be bringing you this Deconstructing Production Workflow webinar. Ryan and I form the production workflow team. And on your screen right now are all the ways that you can interact with us. And we love interacting with you. So we've given you our phone numbers, our LinkedIn accounts, and our Twitter accounts. Feel free to reach out to us on any of those if you have questions, ideas. Also, remember that we are quite prolific, so don't be surprised if you see a bunch of blogs popping up from us. The production workflow service is designed to provide as much insight into production workflow as possible. And so with Ryan and I, what you get are two distinctly different backgrounds. Ryan has this amazing background in graphic arts printing, and with Heidelberg, and I come from a bizarre background in offset transaction and commercial printing, both digital and analog, but also a lot of software in my background. So with that, what we'd like to do is help you understand our strategic scope, and what we'd like to also do is help you understand where we'd like to go with the service, and then we're going to dive into where we think workflow is going and what the forecast that we've just finished tells us is going on. So there we go.
So I'll take this up.
Yep.
Yeah. At the beginning of this year, this is kind of a reminder and a refresher here before we get into the bulk of the webinar around the forecast. But InfoTrends split the production workflow and the customer engagement technology services apart to better serve our clients. The production workflow team, Pat and I will continue to focus on basically the people, processes, and technologies, specifically around software needed to make the work flow, and that's from job onboarding through to completion. We're focused on the needs and challenges of print production that are really faced by print service providers, and that's kind of our key audience. On the other hand, David Stable, who you see pictured here, heads up the customer engagement technology, which is focused on basically customer engagement at the enterprise level. If you have any questions about David's service, please use the contact information or contact your account manager.
Yep, and David is based in Munich, so also remember there's a time zone difference if you do choose to call him. So what's next for the production workflow service? And what we are hoping is that you're going to see from us things that you haven't thought about before, that you are going to hear from us stories about how workflow impacts the business process that will help you and your organizations identify paths forward. When we say we are refocusing on production workflows, what we are really talking about here is trying to bring the service back in to its core competency. Over the last few years, as InfoTrends has grown and the number of different segments we've covered has grown, the production workflow service, it expanded, as you saw on the last slide. And what we want to do now is identify where the best segment, which of the best segments belong in the production workflow group, and which ones not only will go with David or with Matt Swain in the customer communication management group. That there are a lot of things that have been blooming and blossoming within the InfoTrends segment. So with production workflow, what we're going to be looking at are all of those things. Ryan said it first, the things that make work flow. So we want to be looking at all of the things around print MIS, job onboarding. We're going to be looking at all of the things that attach in, the color management add-ins, all of the sort of data connectors that allow you to do data-driven variable data printing. We're going to be looking at the things that allow you to do accounting and business management of all of the things that are coming through the workflow. So it's a big thing all by itself. But then the work world has changed a little bit in the print industry. All of a sudden, now we're looking at packaging in the digital space in a much bigger way than we have in the past. You know, in the past, it was that packaging was an offset analog thing, and while there were some digital solutions around label printing, there wasn't a lot going on around folded carton and corrugated. But today, that's not true. If you were with us at Drupa or you've read any of the overviews of Drupa, you know that packaging was a huge story, and it's just getting bigger because after all, you will always need packaging. So we're going to be looking more deeply at packaging workflows. And the fun part of that is that when you look at label and film and folding carton workflows, it's going to look a lot like commercial printing workflows. There will be some different accounting and job onboarding type differences, but when you get into corrugated workflow right now, it's the Wild West. There's just a tremendous amount of opportunity there, so we're going to be looking forward to not only diving into what's there today, but what it can be. And the other thing we'll be doing is trying on textiles and wearables, because more and more, these are printed items. And as we start to look at the ability with digital presses to print metallics, which give you the opportunity then to print batteries and print technology onto different types of substrates from textiles and all the way through to papers, what you're going to find is that those will require workflows as well. So we're really excited about the possibilities there. And what now I think you're going to see is that the service as we develop it, it's going to get even more exciting than it has been up till now. So with the production workflow service, we have a lot of deliverables. And Ryan?
Yeah, I think one of those key things too is that there's a lot more substrates out there in the world than just paper, right?
Oh Lord, yes there are. So it's textiles, it's paper, it's glass, it's ceramics, it's film. It's just so much stuff out there that it's really exciting.
Right, and digital really unlocks a lot of that potential too, which we're seeing in the market. So yes, back to the deliverables. So subscribers to our production workflow service receive a bundle throughout the year, and one of the largest deliverables is the global forecast, which is what we're focusing on in the webinar today. And we look at the market across 11 different software segments for that and 7 different regions to see, where the market is today and where it's likely to go over the next 5 years. So the current forecast that recently published covers from 2015 to 2020. We also, though, conduct primary research where we interview and survey end users, print service providers, and those who use production workflow software. And that's really to get a pulse on their current and future business strategy and also their software buying trends. And furthermore, we also provide kind of insights into other areas through topic-driven kind of analysis pieces, presentations, and webinars like the one we're on today. Now, we've listened to your feedback, and going forward, we intend to bring you shorter, more focused content with more layers of insight and opinions on the market. And we're also testing new delivery formats like this webinar, and we'd also like to know if you would be interested in an industry-focused conversational podcast that spotlights the latest trends and information for our industry. Based on that, Pat just posted a link to this single survey question, and we really appreciate your taking the survey and showing your interest in a potential podcast. And that URL can also be typed in from what you see on the screen here, highlighted in yellow, or you can click the link more easily and directly from the chat box.
And again, we're hoping that all of you will not only take it, but maybe share that link with your friends and your colleagues so that we can gather as much information as we can. The reasoning behind this is that we believe that a podcast would be really valuable, so that's our bias. We want to know if you think the same thing. We've actually recorded a pilot, and we were really excited about it, so now we just need to prove to our upward management chain that this is something the industry would be interested in.
That's a very good point. Distribute far and wide.
Yep.
I just also wanted to, we have your attention to point you to some other research initiatives that have been going on this year. in case you missed the emails and whatnot as we get distracted sometimes. And that's the annual U.S. Software Investment Survey closed and was published in February. Another one that was focused on cloud software adoption published in June after Drupa. And those were really focused on the North American market. And for Europe this year, we've completed a research piece around the Italian web-to-print market, and we're currently working on research for the European software market as well, and that's in progress and will be coming shortly.
Yeah, we're really excited about that set, so that we have both sides of it, the U.S. and the European software surveys, because they tend to tell us different things. The markets really are quite different.
Yeah, and even within Europe itself, we can kind of cut the information and see how even within inside of Europe there's differences depending on what region, right, you're looking at too. So yeah, it'd be good to get an update and a refresh on that. Now, speaking of that focused content and shorter content, this year's forecast is really an example, our first foray into that. And what I suggest is starting with the What's New section that's on page 6 and 7, and that'll give you kind of the lay of the land or the basically overview of the document's redesign. And it'll really point you to the more insight and opinion sections that are new. That's called Future Forward Insights for Growth. And there's a Global Beat section as well, which is kind of a focus on the 7 regions that we look at. And probably the biggest change to the how we're presenting information is for each software segment or category. And an example of that is seen on the right-hand side of your screen here. And since you all have different areas of interest and focus, we wanted you to really be able to take that key information that's presented in a couple pages, what we like to, Pat and I like to refer to as 2 pages, and really be able to extract those and have those stand on their own as separate handouts and pieces that you wouldn't have to reference other parts of the actual report to get to. So if you're interested in, for instance, in web-to-print or print e-commerce, you can go to that specific section and pull that out. If you're interested in cross-media marketing or print controllers or what have you, it's in there and you can pull it out.
Right, and if you've ever read any of our forecasts back to back, year on year, sometimes you get the sense that you've read something before. And what we promise you about the forecast this year is you will not have that feeling, because Ryan and I worked very hard to take a deep dive into each one of these sections and bring out the highlights, bring out the key takeaways, and really make sure that when you read this forecast, you're going to be able to take those pieces that are important to you away and use them in conversations and in planning without having to dig through pages and pages and pages of other material. If you've subscribed to the forecast and you've read through it, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We consider this year a refining year, so we are trying some new things in the forecast, and if there are things you'd like to see us do a little differently or add, please, again, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So with that said, and with that preamble, what we really want to do is dive into what production workflow and the forecast really mean. And when we talk about deconstructing workflow, what we're doing is taking a hard look at the things that we have covered in the past and the things that we believe need to be covered in order for you to be able to do your job most effectively. So all of the things that we look at around making workflow, it begins with the history of why we have workflow at all. If you've worked in print shops, if you've worked in software development shops, if you've worked in manufacturing shops, you know that there's always an order and a process to how things come in and how they move through the shop. And very often, all of that's documented on whiteboards with different colored markers, or it might be in a spreadsheet that's projected on a wall, or it might be on Post-it notes, or there might be paper travelers that travel with jobs through the environment. And as effective as they have been in the past, over the last decade, you've seen the rise of software to manage most of the workflow processes. And while that software has grown, it hasn't been as widely adopted as some people might believe. We walk into shops any number of times during the year to find that while there is a print MIS installed, or they may have some order entry software or some web to print software, there are still key pieces of the overall workflow that are being managed by hand. So all of those things that should be available and maybe that might be installed to help work flow through, and oftentimes those things are missing. Or alternatively, in-house homegrown software pieces have been written to make the work flow through the shop, but over the years, the way it was originally written and the way business is conducted today don't match up any longer, so there's still a lot of hand-holding. So all of those things that you see on your screen around making workflow, those are all the things that we know need to happen in order to make workflow effective. Over on the right side of the screen under pain points is all of those things that we see and we hear constantly from the people that we talk to, the things that don't quite work the way they would like them to work. How do we get the job from our client into our shop? How do we manage it and execute on it to make sure we deliver it in a timely manner? But not just that, how do we make sure that we're billing for it correctly, that we're pricing it correctly? How do we make sure that at any point in time, we can let our clients know where each one of the jobs we're doing for them is in the work in progress? And in fact, how can we reset priorities if we needed to? So we're looking at all the software options and all the product suite options that will let you do that. And we're really becoming excited about the things that are not only already in the market that might need to be a little bit more visible to the market, but things that are coming into the market. We're also looking at all those pain points around how things arrive in the shop, all of the things that you have to manage, all of the assets and the resources and the different formats. And then how does an organization logically add new capabilities in without breaking a really well working workflow, or without, damaging the ability to onboard a job and get jobs out on time? So we're going to be looking at the things that are creating new opportunities, things like adding geolocation and adding new ways to use data. And then finally, watch as we identify adjacencies. It's our first foray into packaging and textiles, so we think that these are two opportunities that a lot of printers may want to take a look at in order to increase their revenue over time. But it's not going to stop there. We're just about to start show season here with SGIA later this week, Graph Expo in a couple of weeks, Label Expo also happening this week. So it's show season, and when it's show season, there are always interesting new product introductions. So we'll be keeping our eye on those.
Very true. It's definitely getting a busy calendar right now.
It's crazy.
So what are really the top 5 things that you need to know about this year's forecast that was published? So first, let's start with the fact that we see the print production software market at $8.7 billion US dollars in 2015. And we expect that to move toward $13.1 billion by 2020. And that's really about an 8.7% compounded annual growth rate. But here's the trick. Within the various software segments, there's over and underperformers. And I'd really encourage you to explore the supporting pivot table that you can download from the InfoTrends website once you log into your client portal, and really break that into further detail, because that way it gives you a view to look at it by region. It gives it a view by software segments and sub-segments that we have, and so forth.
And we found surprises this year, right? So you really do want to look, because there were some surprise underperformers and overperformers this year.
Yeah, one of the areas I would actually pinpoint is look at graphic arts workflow management, and there's a digital and a conventional sub-segment to that, and that has a really interesting story around it that you should investigate. And again, reach out to us if you have any questions about how to break that information down. The second thing is that the overall growth rate remained in line with last year, but we know that print is growing in some regions. And an example of that is in the U.S., where printing shipments topped 7 billion every month in 2015. And that's according to the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we've seen similar growth in other regions as well. The third takeaway is that North America and Western Europe represent 80% of the entire print production software revenue or market size in 2015. But again, that doesn't tell the entire story. They're actually the slower growing regions throughout our forecasted period through 2020. And we expect other regions like Latin and South America and Asian Pacific specifically to grow faster. Now, you have to temper that because they're starting from a much smaller base to begin with.
But the
Again, that's
opportunity
going to
is
be
there, right? The thing that you should
right.
look at in your planning is, where can I get fast growth if I go into a market with the right story? And again, these market forecasts really do give you a great idea of where to go look to get those great wins.
Exactly. The fourth takeaway is that we do see several areas of opportunity. Again, Pat walked you through where we're refocusing and taking the service going forward. And one of those areas for growth that we see is packaging. And that's really because digital production equipment continues to make inroads in that market, where it's been really a heavily analog market so far. And because of that, we expect workflow automation to really grow, because converters will basically pass the limits of kind of the piecemeal tool sets that many of them have put together over the years, because obviously it's unusual to start with a net new print shop, so or be a net new converter. So over the years, it's like Pat was saying just before about adding additional capabilities and services, you kind of get a lot of disconnected things if you're not really focused on how to make that workflow efficient and automated. So we think that that will be a shift as well for packaging. And Pat, I think you also had some more perspectives on the professional services and cross media as well.
Yeah, if you take a hard look at where companies are making really great margins, a lot of it revolves around professional services, and cross-media marketing gets pulled into that because a lot of cross-media marketing involves help and professional services from the vendors. In the professional services space, one of the things that Ryan and I discovered as we were looking at the forecast for the last several years and then looking at this year is that professional services tends to get underrepresented in the forecast. And a lot of that is because a lot of the vendors don't actually share the revenue numbers out of their professional services group, or they don't link them to workflow in quite the way that we do. So as we started taking a hard look at the major workflow software vendors and the array of professional services teams that they run themselves and that they contract for with additional consulting vendors, there is a tremendous amount of money in that professional services market. These are complex pieces of software going into complex environments. Every customer is different. Every business workflow is different that you're trying to dovetail into. So professional services is a really huge growth area. And that cross-media marketing piece that allows you to create a workflow that takes a single campaign and push it out through multiple channels using comparable imagery and data use concepts. That's again becoming another growth area. It is, however, an area that from our service point of view, we're having conversations with Matt Swain and David Stable around, it's become so technical and it's become such a thing in and of itself that we're wondering if it belongs as part of workflow or as part of one of the other services. So don't be surprised if you see us actually from a reporting perspective move that into one of the other services, but it's still just an amazing growth possibility. And then there's the cloud, Ryan.
Yes, the cloud. And we have a very telltale graphic that Pat will walk you through on the cloud in just a minute. But again, the top five. The cloud obviously is already transforming production print software. But here's the thing, it's been doing it at a slower rate than we originally anticipated, and I think most of the market kind of anticipated. We do see the adoption increasing steadily over our forecast period and kind of ramping up toward the end of that period. But really our recommendation for vendors in particular is that it's really important to bake in functional or operational benefits and really illustrate those value props and financial incentives versus what likely already exists as an on-premise solution. So in other words, you really have to go through the practice of why should that print service provider choose the cloud version versus the on-premise. And it needs to probably have a multi-pronged approach there, not just simply cost, not simply some kind of backup or redundancy, but a multitude of things, right?
It's also, you're going to want to consult really deeply with their IT department and make sure that they understand what their real available bandwidth is from their location. Their service provider might be another organization that you want to have a conversation with to make sure that they're prepared for what happens when you move to these cloud solutions. There have been some sad conversations I've had with companies around the world that tried to move into the cloud and discovered that their local service provider was really not ready for them to do that. So there are a lot of conversations that, you know, it's going to happen. It's going to be there. It's just going to take, I think, a little bit more time because of infrastructure things than we originally. It's not really any different than, you know, all the customer relationship management things we talked about in the 90s, and then it really took until another 10 years later before we really saw the bloom of it because infrastructure had to be laid in place. Cloud's the same thing.
Yep, very, very good point. So those are kind of rounding out the top 5 things that we wanted to point out to you about the forecast.
So one of the things that Ryan mentioned is that we see this amazing market share in North America and Europe, 83% of the market in 2015. But when you look at where opportunity is, while the numbers are really big in North America and Europe, if you're looking for rapid growth in markets that are looking for solutions and are open to this conversation about how to be more efficient, we see this growth in Asia Pacific going from 12% of the market to 14% of the market by 2020. And what's going to happen in those 5 years is an awful lot of consolidation in that marketplace. There's a lot of consolidation going on now, and it's going to continue to go on. And not only is that consolidation going to continue to go on, but these companies are getting more and more sophisticated. They're looking at big, long-term, broad views. So they want solid workflows that are going to help them deliver not only within their country, but to deliver to the entire region. The APAC region, most of you work there, you know that they can be a little bit slow to adopt, that it can be a little bit difficult to make that first sale, but once you have that relationship with that organization, they will look to you to help them grow, and if you've got the solutions for them, they can take you on a pretty wild ride. So we encourage you to look in that region pretty heavily. Now, you notice that we didn't say a lot about South America, and don't ignore South America. There is a tremendous amount of print history, as most of you know, up and down the continent. There are some currency challenges, there are some economic challenges, but there are a lot of incredibly smart print shops that are looking for solutions, and if you can be a little bit patient with them and work with them, there's an awful lot of opportunity there as well.
Very true. So of the forecast, because we're talking about the structure of it a little bit at this point, there's 11 software segments that you'll see in there, and there are some sub-segments, but we kind of bucket those for conversation purposes and how to view it in the 4 main categories here. So customized communications really includes software to create personalized or interactive documents, and that includes variable data software and cross-media marketing software. You move down to operational efficiency, and that's really all about doing the work smarter and not harder, and that includes things like print management or MIS, workflow, and web-to-print workflow management. And then you also get into production integrity, and those are things that are for applications like direct mail and trans promo, where there needs to be high integrity production, and that includes things like functions like track and trace, and that's really where transactional workflows, data transforms, and mail prep solutions fit. And then last but not least, there's this big, rather large bucket for other. Which includes, other. We're very creative here. But it does, speaking of creative, include creative layout, print controllers, and pre-press point solutions. Now, if you're not familiar with the term pre-press point solutions, what that really is things like pre-flooding software, and that's also where we bucket or put code management software at this point, too.
And oddly, so it's in other, Ryan, it's in other where an awful lot of really cool things are happening. You know,
yeah, that's very true.
Creative layout, all of a sudden, after years of being the same suppliers, but watch out, there are a whole lot of new players who are jumping into that market
Some
with,
interesting web-based creative
yeah.
layout that we're seeing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to see a lot more in the pre-pressed point solutions too, where, you know, you look at something like an InFocus switch that's reaching in every direction. You look at the people at Ultimate with their imposition and some of the other imposition software that's out there that are really starting to get up close and personal with the finishing vendors to make sure that the impositions work with the various finishing technologies. That there's a tremendous amount of work going on in our other solutions bucket. It doesn't mean the
Yeah,
other ones are boring. It just means that this is where we're seeing a lot going on.
exactly. And you're right, automation, or imposition automation, I should say, or optimization, you might word it, that's
Yeah.
a really big thing going on right now. I mean, there's a lot of kind of even startup companies that are bringing solutions
Yeah.
to that space.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're going to attend Graph Expo, and I know that a few of them are there, going to be showing it, so it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, a bunch of them are going to be at
Um,
SGIA too, so I'm going to be saying hi to them
that's
later
right.
this week.
Absolutely, that's right. But that was really to set the stage for this. And what it's really saying here is that it's important to view market sizing in different ways. And when you look at it by the categories, what you really see is that other bucket really represents the largest portion of the overall market for print production software. And that's really because creative layout and print controllers combined totaled just over $5 billion in 2015. But as kind of the theme of this webinar, you often have to deconstruct those individual parts to kind of see the whole picture. And to that end, Pat's going to clue us in on kind of what's hot and what's not over the next 5 years.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite charts out of this webinar right now. So I'm blessed with Ryan. Ryan has the ability to do some really cool things on a PowerPoint slide, and he built this for us. And I love it because it gives you that fast look at where the really interesting work is going on. And the thing that might shock you is that transaction workflow management and transaction BDP make the red portion of our thermometer. And a lot of that is because there is a lot of interesting work going on in those spaces. You know, print in the transaction space is not dead. I have to admit that back in 1998, InfoTrends produced a document called The Future of Mail and Transaction Print. And I was one of the authors on that one. And we were absolutely convinced in 1998 that by 2005, you were not going to see any mail that was transaction-based in the mail stream, that all transaction was going to go to people's, well, at that time we thought they would go to their desktop web browsers. And we got it wrong. Because what's happened in the working environment around transaction is that all of the organizations that pushed really hard to get people to go to electronic only delivery of any variety found a lot of pushback. People are really, you know, individuals. They want to get things the way they want to get them, and it turns out that paper is still the most comfortable way to receive things that have to do with your personal financial life, and it is not age dependent. There was a lot of talk a few years ago that this would all change with the rise of the millennial and they would only want things on their phones, and it turns out that most of the research says, you know, yeah, maybe 12–15% of them that's true, but paper still remains the dominant form of preference, the dominant preference form for personal financial communication. So given that, if you're in the transaction space, if you're in the transaction variable data space, transpromo space, or in the transaction workflow management space, keep your eyes open because there's a lot of opportunity there. There are needs there. There are desires there. And we see that these are still pretty hot markets. Now, we find while cross-media marketing is clearly a heavy growth market, and it's going to be for some time as organizations start to take a hard look at how it is they can communicate consistently. And this is a story we've been telling for 15 years. If you are a brand organization, whether you're an insurance company, a bank, or a retailer, you want to communicate consistently across all of the channels of communication with your end consumer. And the fact is that today, it's a good talk track, but it doesn't happen as often as you think. And you can look at your own mailbox and watch television or read a magazine to see how brands communicate inconsistently. So we think that this will continue to be a growth area. Again, we think we might move it out of our service. Big growth opportunity. But for us, the things that are really hot for us to look at are those transaction pieces. Print e-commerce linkages are huge. Web to print, clearly a huge area of growth. Now, with web to print, it's interesting. There are a tremendous number of net new companies in the market around web to print. There are a lot of net new platforms in the market around web to print. So it is definitely an area that people are interested in. All of these startups seem to be making money, so they have found the clientele. The interesting thing is to look at the different features to figure out what they're doing that's attracting attention. An awful lot of them are ripe for acquisition, so it's worth keeping your eye on. Web mail prep solutions are not dead. Oddly, I keep thinking that they should be. I've been in the transaction space for 30 years. I keep thinking we've done everything we can do, and yet the mail prep solution providers continue to find unique things to bring to the market. So there's a lot of activity there, certainly around creative layout, as we just mentioned. And if you look down at the blue stuff, if you look at print-specific MIS and graphic arts VDP and print RIPs and controllers, the pre-press point solutions, the graphic arts workflow management, what we're saying there is that there's still opportunity. It's a lower opportunity. It's a slower opportunity in terms of growth and in terms of revenue. But if you've got the cool thing, if you've got the cool feature that everybody wants, then the CAGRs mean nothing, the growth rates mean nothing, because you will find that the market will come to you. There is a thirst for optimization and efficiency. Our friend Charlie Core used to call it super efficient workflows. There is a thirst for that in every organization that has to guard every penny that they put out the door when they're building their workflow infrastructure. So just because we've rated them as cooler doesn't mean that there's not opportunity there.
Yeah, and even going a little bit deeper, Pat, too, take something like the graphic arts workflow management, which is showing like a 2% CAGR. There's always opportunity within these categories, right? So if you break that out between digital and conventionally focused workflow management, digital is actually at 11.9, so it would kind of be on our hot list. But just because it's you know, in the larger category there, you don't see that without taking and deconstructing it, as we're kind of alluding to, right?
Yeah, I think everybody who's been working in conventional workflows for years, who sort of avoided or only got, you know, maybe a toe and an ankle into the digital side, they should be going all in on the digital side and making sure that they have linkages between their current workflow environment, their current analog workflow offerings and digital offerings, because their customers are going to be moving in that direction. There's no doubt about that.
Right, and that takes us to the cloud again.
Gosh, don't we love
the cloud? Like a thunder cloud, like a dun dun dun.
Okay, so it's 2015, or it was 2015 last year. It's 2016 this year. But fundamentally, this cloud is how we see the overall market in relation to the crowd. The overall market really isn't there yet. There are a lot of early adopters. I think your biggest clients with their own IT infrastructure, these are the organizations that are going to be most likely to be interested early on. The vast market, however, is still looking at it and trying to figure out. They might have a toe in for a subscription as a service piece, but they haven't gone all in. Now, what happens in 5 years? Does the cloud take over the entire horizon? Well, not really. Ryan said it before. I've said it before. It's going to happen, but it's going to happen on a shallower ramp than maybe some would like to see. It's going to get bigger. There's revenue, there's opportunity, there's margin, but it's not going to completely displace the on-premises solutions. If you talk to anyone in the transaction space, they will tell you that they have client sets. You probably have client sets that aren't allowed to use cloud services at the moment because their internal audit teams won't allow them to do it for security purposes. I know I've worked in environments where in a normal environment, a press was set up to phone home and provide information back to the organization about when maintenance was needed or when supplies were needed. And in most transaction environments, that's not permitted. So you will, I think, continue to see a balance, but it's going to be a good long ramp before we see that cloud actually take over a larger part of that horizon, and I don't think it's ever going to take it over completely.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out here that it's proportional here based on the forecast. So the entire pictured area here, including the soil and everything, would be the entire market size, and relative to the clouds that you saw for 2015 and 2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
So,
right, so kind of wrapping it up here. Go ahead, Pat, take us home.
yeah, so what we want to tell you is don't go it alone. Some of you on the webcast here are subscribers to the production workflow service. Some of you have been a subscriber in the past and are not a current subscriber. Some of you have not ever been a subscriber to our service, but you took the time to come and hang out with us in this hour, so we're hoping that you'll consider us. Workflow is more important today than ever before, and if we've left you with anything over the course of this slide set, what we're hoping to leave you with is how important workflow is, how important it is to the end client, to their business process, to their margins, to their efficiency. And the other thing that we're hoping to have left you with is that Ryan and I are here to invigorate this service, to make sure that we're looking at all the things that are important to you, and we are open to taking your guidance on things that we should be looking at that you don't think we're covering. We have our fingers into a lot of different things, and our backgrounds are just different enough that we are we play off of each other well. We would like to continue to build this service up, bring on some more team members to help us grow it even bigger, and we're hoping that you will consider the value that you've gotten in this last hour to be worthy of your consideration when your budgets come up and as our sales team approach you for either renewing the workflow service or buying into it for the first time. We know that workflow is it's the infrastructure to everything else that happens, to all of the other services that InfoTrends provides. We know that an awful lot of your customers and clients don't have key workflow architectures. They haven't documented their workflows. They might have bought a lot of components and pieces, but not maybe linked them together in the most efficient way for their working today. So we hope to be your partner in helping them make great decisions. And as the cloud gets more important, as it fills up more of that horizon, we hope that you'll look to us to help you identify the way cloud and server-based workflows can work together, because they do demand review, and they will demand ongoing review. It's not going to be a one-time and we're done. Ryan and I are definitely here to help.
And one thing that you mentioned, Pat, was workflow, is basically the technology infrastructure. One of the ways that I heard it phrased that I really liked was, since we're talking about print, that's the gas to make the print engine go. So that's another way to kind of look at it from a print-centric kind of point of view.
It absolutely is, and we hope that you'll not only consider the workflow service, but please keep an eye out for blogs and webinars, hopefully podcasts. We're active out on LinkedIn. I try to be active out on Twitter as well, so we hope that you'll look to us not only for the paid services, but also for market trends that we share with the industry in general. We want to be the face out there, and we're really excited about the opportunity the market is giving us. So we're open for questions if you have any.
Yeah, a couple things here. First, if you joined late, we're glad that you joined. or if you didn't, if you still haven't clicked the link that Pat threw out in the chat box, that's the bit.ly link to take that one question survey. Again, we'd really appreciate that. And again, distribute far and wide to any colleagues you may have that might be willing to take that as well. In terms of just the logistics of the questions, we have a couple questions in the question box that I'll take here in a second, but also if you want to answer a question over the phone, you can click the raise your hand icon in the toolbar, and we'll see that come across too. So in the question box, one question that we had is that earlier in the presentation on the top 5 slide, we mentioned that the North American and Western European markets represented right at 80% of the entire software forecast or market size. And then a couple slides later, Pat was going through the world view, and it showed it as basically 83%. So yes, you caught that. It's actually a slight distinction. The first value at 80% was just North America and Western Europe, and then the view that Pat shared at 83% included also Eastern Europe. So there's just a slight distinction in the territory there that caused the difference. So
and Eastern Europe is growing. Yeah, that's
yes, it is.
It's another one of those opportunity markets where the numbers are currently small, but the growth rates are high, and the opportunity, especially if you're already providing services and solutions in Europe, Eastern Europe is a great place to be looking to expand your footprint.
Okay, just got to check the call list here. Let me pop open the attendees. I don't see any with a raised hand. Just one last thing to also mention. Oh, it looks like.
Yep, we got one.
Question. Let me.
Overall market size adjusted upward due to new info for professional services and maintenance rates that forced adjustments in several segments. Ah, yes. This was our favorite thing to do in the forecast this year, wasn't it?
It seemed like it.
So as Ryan and I took a hard look at the forecast from last year, one of the things that we saw was that there was an emphasis on acquiring numbers across the sale of specific software, and looking at hosted versus cloud-based, and looking at maintenance revenues. And professional services was generally looked at as a drag along, and the percentages that we saw in the forecast from last year seemed quite low to us based on our history in the marketplace. So we tested our idea on more likely drag along rates for professional services, and we tested the maintenance rates with our key vendors. And if we didn't talk to you specifically, anybody on the call, feel free to contact us back if you'd like to share your maintenance rates and your professional services revenues. We were going off of information that we had from specific clients that we've worked with and customers that we worked with, knowing what they're paying. And based on that, we saw that we were low. And we were low in certain categories in a sort of an interesting way. So if you're comparing, especially in the transaction software, the mail prep software, Ryan, what were the 4 we restated?
Yeah, web to print. For professional services, we didn't restate web to print, but for the professional services component of print e-commerce, as it's called in the forecast, that we did readjust the professional services rate to match what's going on in the market. So that was another one just for the professional services side of it. But what I would do is I'd point you back to the report, that because up in the front matter section, kind of in that what's new, we kind of, and even in the 2 pages that for each segment, we kind of call out those adjustments that were made.
And why. So if you're not a subscriber, jump on in and subscribe, and you'll be able to read all that. And if you are a subscriber and you can't find it, or you need a little bit more guidance there, please don't hesitate to ping us, and we'll be happy to help.
There's also, just to throw it out there for non-subscribers, if you go to the InfoTrends main website, InfoTrends.com, there's a link to the store, and you can actually purchase the report through the store as well for the North American or European market, depending on what your preference is there. Yeah.
And we encourage you to do that. This is a really great forecast. I've been on the receiving end of forecasts for the last 13 years. since I left InfoTrends 13 years ago. So for the last 13 years, I've watched these forecasts really, really carefully. And you know, I was building my bucket list of things I would like to see. So I'm really anxious to get your feedback on how we've changed it this year so that it sort of met my bucket list criteria. Now I need to make sure it meets your bucket list criteria. All right.
Exactly.
Well, it
So, so
looks,
again,
any more questions? It doesn't look like we have
I
any.
think the question queue is clear. So again, just to wrap it up, we appreciate you joining and taking the time out of your day. The session was recorded, and we will send that out to the attendees a little bit later on, so you'll receive that, and it also will be a downloadable link on the InfoTrends website as well. And we'll have more information, obviously, if you're a client, when you log into the portal there too.
Right, and if you need
So that
either
said,
of us, go ahead and throw that last slide up there with our email addresses, just in case anybody missed it. So this is how to reach us. We're the easiest people on earth to find. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we hope you have an absolutely productive and splendid day.
all right, thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye-bye.